All right, hello everyone. Good afternoon. We're here today to speak about NFTs and NFT IP and licensing. And we have here a distinguished group of individuals who I think we can start with Edmund and kind of go down the line and introduce ourselves. And,
Okay.
I don't think we should say who we are, what we do, and what we find interesting about NFTs and IP or what we're working on right now.
All right, very good. So my name is Edmund Almond. It's my mother's fault. She loved poetry. I'm with a company called Eureka, and our focus is IP protection, and we deal with individuals. We have products for that, and we are also dealing with corporations, and we deal with governments. We've got some exciting announcements coming up in the next couple of days. And what am I, Carrie? I'm like, we have all these names that we give each other. VP of, I don't know. No, they changed that. Something. So we do, but basically we're there to work with creators of any type, be it artistic, visual, musical, when you get into technical, to protect that IP.
All right. I'm Augustin Barbara. I am the managing partner at the Crypto Lawyers, headquartered here actually in Brickell. We are a full-service crypto firm, everything from securities to IP, NFTs, metaverse, and so forth. My background is I'm a U.S. registered patent attorney. That's how I got exposed into blockchain technology, and I handle all of the IP components of the firm.
Hello, I'm Cass Vegas. I work at Feature. I am head of community there. We focus on IP and licensing on chain. And so a couple of our big IPs we've done is Huxley. For Netflix, we did Love, Death, and Robots. We did their Love, Death, and Art. And for Coinbase, we did the DEGEN trilogy. So very excited for our convo today. Thanks.
Hi, I am Luisa Castro. I am the head of legal of QB and also the partner of a law firm called FIU in Portugal. We are also working with crypto projects at general scope, so from all the areas of it. My background is normally corporate and contracts, which ends up tangling quite a bit with IP once we are talking about metaverses or NFTs. So that's how I started with the IP part of it. But yeah, crypto I've been working for a couple of years now. Before it was a whole ecosystem. So we started on smart contracts and working with developers a couple of years back. And then now we have a couple of big projects that we start working. And yeah, my law firm now, it's, I would say 98% clients that have crypto background, and yeah, that's pretty much it.
Hi everyone, my name is Moish Peltz. I'm a partner at Falcon Rappaport & Berkman in New York, where I head up the IP practice group, and over the past few years have been growing our blockchain digital asset group, and coming from, again, like Augustin, from the IP background, and then transitioning to the crypto practice has been exciting, even though I've been interested in crypto since 2013. Before we get started, just most of us are attorneys. Nothing here is legal advice, but aside from that, I'm curious for the panel. We were talking backstage about some of the more explosive things that have happened perhaps in the past few weeks in just more macro crypto. How do you think, if you were to encapsulate the last, say, 2 years of intellectual property, focusing on that like silo, how do you think, from your view, has the last 2 years gone? What went well and what didn't go well, right? Like, I think there were some pretty big wins, like things that you're mentioning, like the Coinbase trilogy, like really cool, like just global phenomena that were NFT based IP, and then I think there's also some things that were perhaps left on the table that were unrealized, that now that we're entering this bear cycle, perhaps we'll be able to hit, in the coming months or years. And so I'm just kind of curious your take holistically on the past couple of years and where we're at now.
Should I jump on that?
Yeah, I'll go right after.
There are One of the most exciting things, and I think part of it is that I've spent time in film. I was with Sony Pictures for a while. Was Stoner Cats and the use of an NFT to access the show. That was one of the most exciting constructs for me. And then another that's good and bad was the exposure of the lack of knowledge of copyright. Very few people seem to understand the truth about using visuals, be they handmade photographs, and then music, what you can take, what you can't. But what it's caused, I think, is an opportunity for just lay people to go back and study case law, to actually start digging in and going, well, what does this mean? Let me ask my attorney friends. And I'm sure all of you have had some of those questions from folks that have wanted to know. And so here we are, a little bit smarter and looking for more education.
I think of it in a couple of tracks. I think of it as you kind of see a repetitive pattern of certain bad actors that come through, things fall, press happens, the optics are relatively not so good. But I would say the difference between maybe a couple years back and now is that there are some parts of the space that are pretty undeniable. And so when you think about IP and these larger studios, companies all coming in, you can kind of see that some are a little early and some are a little late, but they're all working to develop their Web3 branch. The other interesting part about it is the psychology of IP. So you have all these early projects that say, hey, we'll give you IP rights. But an IP that's not fully developed by any old artist, it's kind of useless at this point. And then the larger companies like Nike or Disney, that's the IP you want, but they're never going to give it up to you. And so you kind of have this interesting parallel that I think people are not thinking about when they get really optimistic about the space. But remember, those large companies have worked really hard to get their IP. So why would they kind of just hand it off? And so it's a dichotomy that we think about a lot in the IP space.
It's a little frustrating, I think, right now where we're at. We were talking about, everyone's talking about FTX now, and that's kind of the hot. But, you know, what about before FTX, right? We had Voyager, we had Celsius, we had Three Arrows. So we're constantly, it's repeating itself, and then we act surprised. The same could be said about IP. We are in this sort of vicious cycle where we are not providing any sort of innovation. There's so many things that could be done with IP, but we keep implementing the same thing over and over and over, and it's really drawn out. I mean, it's boring. At this point, it really is boring. The profile picture, gone. It's done, right? What else do you bring to the table? And with IP, you can really take advantage of the amount of things that could be done, whether it be through commercialization, licensing. It's quite significant. So right now, we're just kind of stuck in this like Groundhog's Day, sort of every day is the same. So much so where I really am in a position now where I don't take those types of clients at the firm because it's just not fun. It's not, you know, the goal here is to do something more, right? Innovation.
Yeah, I mean, complimenting and agreeing with everything you just said. But taking a step back, like this have been the most recent, but we're talking about 2 years now. And then I remember like last year, like in the beginning of this year, we had so much advancement. Now we are stuck in a bit of frustration, but we had so much advancement as well. Okay, that's not legislation-wise. We're still applying copyright and IP law as is always have been done. But if you think about it, now we have like the Hermes case, we have Nike case. So we are starting to see actually things going to court. We are starting to see a bit of a deeper legal discussion, even though it's not the most interesting one. It's a bit of the same that we have been for years, but at least now it's starting to be more concrete to Web3. So we are starting to build some kind of base for the Web3 space on which lawyers that are to the stage that they are on those court cases, they can start to bring up good arguments that will actually change the space and actually add up something instead of just being repeating those loops. And I mean, OpenSea had taken a couple of NFTs out of auction because the artists were complaining. So we are starting to see somewhat movement in this side, not from regulators, but from people, from the artists itself. So I think a lot of the IP legal movement that we're starting to see are coming from the artists itself, from them saying, okay, this is not fair. This is not how I want my work to be done. It's not because I didn't say that this copyright was or was not included in the NFT that you should just assume whatever you want and do whatever you want. It's not how it works. So as frustrating as some things have been, I think we had somewhat advancement that have been good to the space.
Are we repeating the things that we tried to avoid in transitioning to Web3 all over again? In other words, are the big players, big corporations, taking control of the space?
Right. Are the winners going to be, Nike and major film studios and major music studios? So I think that's a good, responding to what the panel was saying, right? I think on the one hand, there's a lot of movement on the legal side of attorneys coming to consensus of what these things are and how they might work and what the legal ramifications are and how a court case like Hermes might work in that fair use analysis, either under copyright or trademark, might be applied to NFTs or other Web3 ecosystem type activities. So there's that on the other hand, and then I agree very much, Agustin, with this concept that we're also seem to be kind of recycling a lot of the same ideas. So from your mind, where does the innovation come from? Where does all of that mesh? And if you were to think optimistically, sitting here in 2 years, what would be a breakthrough or an innovation that would be specific to IP that you would either envision or maybe you're even working on, and how do you see that trending?
I think the main thing you have to understand that NFTs should be a supplement, not an actual, in and of itself, right, main sort of component. And when you take that into account, so for example, Nike, just because we're throwing that company around, right? They're an apparel, but they're using NFT to tap into another market, right? Another demographic, and they're doing a really good job at it. So we represent a client who has this very good superhero character. The point is that they're using NFTs to further expand and develop, not to reinvent anything. They're still going to have traditional means. However, the NFT will actually augment the experience. Now, that can entail anything from, outside of the traditional realm, which is the merchandise and real life experiences, but it's another component, right, that you can use to market, right? I mean, now we have to get creative. We own our data, right? And so how can we take advantage of it? Well, you have to get creative. And so I think we have to put less focus on the value that putting, a company solely focused on NFTs as opposed, and rather redirect it into how can we incorporate NFTs to make our brand better.
I have a slightly different perspective, or maybe an additive to that. I think it depends on what perspective you're speaking from. So I think you gave a great example from a brand perspective, but from the other way around, from a Web3 native side, the NFT is the brand and they are companies. So some good examples of that is like Deadfellas. They are a Web3 native brand that then partners with Web2. They had Wrangler come in, they had Steve Aoki. It wasn't the other way around. They didn't supplement it. So it just depends on the perspective. And the same with what we did with Huxley 2 years ago, or a year and a half ago for Huxley actually, when we were going to PR, they were like, never tell us about NFTs. Don't ever come to us to write anything about that. And, now it's going to be the first Ethereum-based NFT film by Arad Productions from, Marvel and Ghost in the Shell. And so it's being turned into a game as well. But this also kind of has the backing of that artist, which is Ben Morrow. It's not just someone who decided to pick up a pen and a pencil and said, I want to get into NFTs. He was on Call of Duty, he did Halo Infinite, the Hobbit trilogy. And so I think the intersection of when you get into Web3 really matters of how you navigate that space. And if it's supplemental to who that artist is, now we're being additive, or if you're Web3 native and brands are actually coming to you to partner. And so I think that's kind of, the perspective is important of where you come into the space.
Yeah, very interesting, because I thought you were going in one direction there where it says, well, we're onboarding all these Web 2 brands. I'm like, well, is that really the Web 3 native way to do it? But I think if you strike that balance, like you're describing, there's a way to keep it native, but then onboard people that earnestly want to partner with you for the right reasons. Does that sound?
To the extent that Web 3 asks you to be an entity of your own, more responsible. And you guys are talking about regurgitation. I'm really interested in the, what did they call them? I forgot the name of the artist, the woman that was doing soft sculpture, and those became Cabbage Patch dolls. And then there was the argument between her and the manufacturer of Cabbage Patch dolls, which, and you guys know, it went to court, but it was settled. Is that unfinished case something that does us disservice now in the Web3 space? To me, it does.
Almost everything is doing it a disservice unless you're actually in the bubble that we're in. I think the true understanding has to become into the participation and not just the quickest title that you read on any article. And so it's really kind of hard to say, but I see it kind of moving from the inside outward to get true information out. And that's why I really actually enjoy international panels as well, to just get perspectives and not the bubble within the US bubble, right?
Yeah, and that's also part of it, because here in the US it's common law. I normally, most of my clients, since we are mostly based in Europe, we have clients worldwide, but our main office is in Europe, and there is civil law. So for us, it's very interesting to see how common law here, because US is still one of the pioneers of everything as it's going now, or at least one of the big hubs that are starting to migrate to Europe. And part of that, it's because, well, the civil code makes it a bit more safe than the uncertainty of how the judges are going to see, because it's a new space, so a lot of them are novelty cases, so it's a bit uncertain still. So once you move to the civil code part of it, so a lot of them are going to Europe, not just because of it, but as a part of it as well. They have been treating the part of Web3 as it's called now, so as any other Web 1, Web 2, or startup. So it's one more on it, so you know what to expect, which is bad because it's not what we want. And at the same time, you're starting to see a huge wave of legislation changes, and it's somewhat really interesting to see that whatever happens sometimes in the US, it comes into a wave to the other side. So we start seeing, okay, we had this problem here, we had a court cases, and then we start seeing companies migrating, and then legislators in the other side of the world saying, okay, this happened there, that was a problem, so we have to do something about it, which leads to unfinished regulations, which leads to MiCA and all of the mess that we are going through now. It's the legislator trying to run to say, okay, let's see what we can save from this space, let's see what we can regulate as fast as we can, to not become like a savage world or something.
Yeah, I think in 2 years we probably will be talking a lot about MiCA and whether that moved the ball relative to the U.S. and whatever the conversation is there on, at least in those two jurisdictions, if not many more. Edmund, you mentioned royalties in the answer there, and changing gears a little bit, a couple of years ago, one of the most exciting things for me getting into this space was this concept of, if you're an artist, you can claim ownership of something you can create. You can then find your audience, sell to your audience, and allow your audience to then resell, and you as the artist participate in those resale royalties, potentially in perpetuity. And that's on the artist side. And on the brand side, right, you can think about, instead of having these kind of insane global royalty machines that track, how many sales happen in Japan and send it back here, 50%. So the both on the business side and on the artist side, there's these huge royalty implications. I thought amazing use case for blockchain. I think sitting here today, both on the artist side, there's a lot of questions about what the different marketplaces are doing in terms of switching to no royalty or royalty optional type marketplaces. And then on the business side, it seems like a lot of those kind of on-chain, off-chain type transactions that haven't really come to fruition in the way we've imagined. At least not that, if you know otherwise, I'd love to hear about it. So just switching gears to royalties, I'd love to, where do you see that landing right now and perhaps trending in the future?
Yeah, royalties, when you get into payment of royalties, you're dealing with different things in different industries. For example, music. People will talk about royalties and not realize that their vision is limited, that there are many ways you can get paid for music, right? There are many royalty streams. So how do you set up an accounting system that works on blockchain? It's possible, but then how do you get the PROs, the performing rights organizations, to adopt it? How do you get an organization like Musician Secondary Markets Fund that's very efficient with a small crew? They don't need it, but maybe it would be easier for them in the future. So it's a conversation that's ongoing. Then when you get into literary works, it's a whole different situation, and how do you get the companies to adopt a blockchain-based solution? For us, I'll jump in about the music thing. For us, we've got a music division, we've got a music publishing arm, so it's a chance for us to experiment. And as we go through, as Eureka doing these kinds of things, we'll let everybody know, what we come up with, and we'll share that stuff so we can move forward with it. And then again, you continue forward. We go from music to writing to film to photography. How do you deal with a photographic library? Is it easier for that photographic library to be accessed on-chain? Are royalties more easily paid that way? Just every single creative industry has a different need, if you will, but certainly different issues that need to be addressed.
I think right now there's two schools of thoughts in this sort of space with NFTs. One is, well, we're doing work, we should be get residuals, right? In other words, we should get paid for it and use that to continue to invest into the project. And then there's well, you should be earning it. And so how do you reconcile both? I don't necessarily have the answer. It really depends on what you're relying on to have that constant capital, right? Because one, it's still a business, right? You have to understand that the NFT, whether it's from Web3 or it's still a functioning business, you have to, you have overhead that you have to cover. Now, if you're not charging royalties, you have to that's where the innovation comes in. How are you going to maintain that constant capital? Because once it's sold, that's it. So one way to, of doing that is, okay, you have the NFT now, you've sold it, and that NFT is part of a larger project. And so if you need to essentially access another level or another layer of the project, you have to continuously buy. So now this is where the innovation comes in, where you bypass the royalties and you're still sort of receiving that, because at the end of the day, right, if you're not having royalties and you're relying solely on minting, it's not sustainable. And I don't have the answer, but this is where the whole innovation thing comes in as to how can you supplement it and find the middle ground.
I think it's safe to say that probably none of us up here have the answer yet, but I do have some thoughts into the, steps into the right direction. And the first thing is we need more professionalism in the space. We need more people that are familiar with IP and licensing, people that are familiar with every sector like music, film, photography, and those expertises to spill into where the developers are, because the developers are only developing what they think is important to them. They're developing to where the tech leads, they're developing to where the ecosystem is, they're developing to wherever they're getting paid, and so they're not thinking on that line of the professionalism of every single sector. So that's the first thing that I think needs to happen. From there, also backtracking, Ethereum itself is still being made. There's like 5 other iterations coming through. You know, you have the Verge, you have the Scourge, you have the Splurge. Things you guys were gonna have to Google after this, but look it up. There's literally more iterations after this, and we just finished the Merge, right? So it's Merge, Verge, Surge, Scourge, and Splurge.
I actually think
you can look that up.
the Vitalik chart of the different splurges and purges looks really similar to the FTX org chart.
Potentially. This is why we don't know the answer. But the point of the matter is that even the chains that we're operating this on are being developed as we speak with things like scalability in mind. And so we need to bring that arm of professionalism into the realm of developers and artists, which is what kind of the bare bones of the space is right now.
Yeah, and that also in the developer side of things, I have been seeing the last years amount of projects that are starting to tackle exactly that, the royalty part. So they want to take from the big corporations and take a control of the big media and bring to the project itself. And then we enter the whole tokenization wave, which we all know that it's not everything that you should tokenize. It's not because you can that you should be doing it. But that at least became from the developers saying, and the artists and everyone saying, okay, we want to have control of that. So tokenization for some projects could work, having a DAO could work in another. Anyway, you have a variety of different solutions, creative solutions that are starting to surge, that we see every day more that's now one size fits all. So I think the nightmare of every lawyer is like, I saw a project that did exactly this. I want you to do the same because it sounds cool. It's like, it wouldn't work for you. But it was so nice. Yeah, so you have to explain why or why not, but at least we are having different solutions, and that could work. But then again, we don't have the answer to what will be the best. For a lot of those great ideas, we don't even know what the consequences will be, which is preoccupying on some point. But that's where, well, our work it's added to try to predict and mitigate that as much as we can. And yeah, sometimes we are the annoying people in the company saying, sorry, you cannot do that. And then the developers go crazy and have to change the project. But it is what it is sometimes. But at least I see some novelty coming along in new projects. Every conference that we go, you will see at least one big project talking about royalty now. So
Yeah, and I think that's one of the kind of exciting and frustrating things about IP is that you're very often forced to repeat these kind of the recycle these ideas of the way IP has been used historically, but then be able to iterate and innovate and create these systems where there's the opportunity to apply a new framework to this existing IP or wholly generative IP. Just really briefly, just wrapping up here, we have a couple minutes left. Reasons to be optimistic about IP from your perspective going forward, and then we'll wrap it up.
My most recent experience is dealing with other countries and looking at definitions of what is a blockchain, and taking a look at, for example, Estonia, what they're doing with KSI, allows governments to go forward and look for solutions to a lot of issues that we're discussing on-chain.
I would say if we really want to have a serious talk about IP and where it's going, there needs to be a layer of legitimacy and transparency in this space that we're seriously lacking right now. If I'm going to be investing into, thousands of dollars into a project, I want to know that it's not, Nano X Layer 64, right? That's spearheading the project. It's a business at the end of the day. And so I think once we sort of address that, then we'll start to really take things to another level where we can really sit down and have these conversations. But so long as we don't have any sort of terms or NFTs that just drop, there's still not enough stability to really make these substantial gains in the space.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. And what we're doing at Features, we're putting it on chain so that it has that transparency. And we're opening up the ability for Feature IP to have your project on the platform and people being able to see what deals are being made, what type of vertical you're choosing as a holder. So people always think about the creators having, this autonomy, but also now the holders will be able to say, hey, I want to do a 5-year non-exclusive with X, Y, and Z, or just gaming 30 days. And I set the price, and I set the vertical, and I say if there's merch or not, and we have all these different terms and conditions kind of ready for you to go, and putting it on chain so other people can say, wow, they just made 100 ETH on their ape, selling it for that video game to that company, and you have more transparency of deals, and it will encourage people to put things on chain, seeing kind of the result of that. And we also comb through all the terms and conditions and make sure that we're able to do that. So when we had Moonbirds on there, we had to take it off because they went to CC0, but we still have World of Women on there, or Woodies, and looking to add Oni Force. And so that transparency that you're talking about, it needs to be on chain. Besides just, you bought this for this amount from this anonymous person, we want to see what is that actual IP relating to, and I think that will save a lot of people and a lot of brands, some heartaches.
Well, quickly, because we are out of time. I just think that on the bright side of it, on top of all of the transparency that is apparently starting to happen finally, is the interest of the big corporations, which it's not what we want, but honestly, if all of the big corporations where the big money is are starting to actually be preoccupied and interested in IP, we know that things are going to start to move because, well, money is there and they're going to push it as well. So for better or worse, I think big monies are starting to take interest on that. So for better or worse, something is going to happen.
Well, thank you to all our panelists, and thank you to all you.
Thank you.